Sometimes you stumble on something and you're like, whoa, how have I not seen this before?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I felt with this 1847 edition of Euclid's Elements that you brought in. Um, it's not every day you encounter a nearly 200-year-old math book
Mm.
that feels so surprisingly, like, modern.
Yeah, it's all thanks to Oliver Byrne, the author. He really took a subject that was often seen as like dry and intimidating, right, geometry, and he found a way to make it visually engaging, almost like a precursor to the infographics that we kind of rely on today.
It's like he took a box of crayons to Euclid's Elements.
Yeah,
Instead of the usual letters to label triangles and diagrams, we get weight colors.
precisely. Byrne believed that color wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about making geometry easier to understand and remember. Imagine trying to, like, decipher a complex proof with letters labeling every single point and line. I mean, it gets confusing.
Yeah.
So Byrne wanted to simplify that process, make those spatial relationships instantly clear.
Okay, so color-coded geometry. I'm with you so far.
Mm-hmm.
But paint me a picture here. How does this actually work in practice?
So let's take like a classic example, the Pythagorean theorem, the one that states in a right-angle triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So in a traditional textbook, you would see a triangle with sides labeled A, B, and C.
Right, and for anyone who hasn't looked at the Pythagorean theorem since high school, that can feel a bit like trying to read a foreign language.
Exactly. But Byrne does away with all of that. Instead of letters, he might use like a red line for one side, blue for another, and yellow for the hypotenuse. And then he visually represents the squares of each side using those same colors. So you're not just reading a theorem, you're seeing the relationship between the squares laid out right in front of you.
So instead of deciphering letters and lines, it's like those color matching games we played as kids.
Oh, sure.
Except you end up proving a geometric theorem. Did this approach catch on? Did Byrne's book spark any debate in the educational world?
It's fascinating you ask that. So while it wasn't a complete, overhaul of traditional methods, Byrne's work proved incredibly influential, even inspired the use of color-coded diagrams in math textbooks throughout, the late 19th century. Some critics at the time, though, did accuse Byrne of oversimplification, worrying that relying too heavily on visuals would sacrifice the rigor of, traditional geometric proofs.
So it wasn't just about the visuals themselves, but a deeper conversation about how we learn and teach math. That tension between wanting to make information accessible while maintaining academic rigor, it's a debate that continues today, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it kind of makes you wonder, if a visual approach like Byrne's could make geometry less intimidating, what about other subjects, that are traditionally taught in a very abstract way?
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, Byrne's work feels like a precursor to the infographics we see everywhere today. I mean, we use visuals all the time to make complex information more digestible, whether it's data visualization, charts, or even just color coding and presentations.
Exactly. Think about how much easier it is to grasp a concept in physics when you can actually visualize things like force vectors or wave propagation, or in history, how timelines and maps can help us make sense of chronology and, the relationships between different cultures.
Yeah, it's almost like taking a dry textbook and turning it
Right.
into an interactive museum exhibit. Suddenly, you're not just reading about history, you're experiencing it spatially and visually.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And that's the real power of visual learning. It engages different parts of our brains. It helps us connect the dots and see the bigger picture in a way that, text alone often can't.
So Byrne gives us this powerful example of visual learning in action. But how far can we take this idea? Could his approach be applied to any subject? Or are there limits to what visual learning can achieve?
That's the million-dollar question. While visual aids can be incredibly powerful, it's important to acknowledge that not every subject lends itself easily to visual representation. And even when we can use visuals, they shouldn't be seen as a replacement for deeper understanding and critical thinking.
So it's about finding the right balance. Using visuals strategically to make information more accessible and engaging, but without sacrificing the depth and complexity of the subject matter.
Precisely. It's about using the right tool for the job. Just as a hammer is great for nails, but not so much for screws, visual learning is one tool in our learning toolkit. And we need to be mindful of when and how to use it effectively.
This has really got me thinking about how we learn and absorb information. Byrne's book isn't just about math. It's an aesthetically beautiful object in its own right. I was looking at some of the images from this 1847 edition, and they're stunning. Intricate patterns and vibrant colors. It's like a blend of geometry and art.
Absolutely. Byrne understood that aesthetics play a role in learning. He created something that was both informative and visually appealing, tapping into that innate human desire for beauty and order. And that's something we often forget in our pursuit of knowledge, that learning doesn't have to be like dry and tedious. It can be beautiful and inspiring.
It makes you wonder, like, if we put more effort into presenting information in a way that was both engaging and visually stimulating, would people be more inclined to learn and explore new ideas?
It's a fascinating thought experiment. Imagine textbooks as captivating as coffee table books, scientific papers as works of art, even the most mundane data reports infused with a touch of visual magic. And that might sound far-fetched, but I think there's a real value in making information more accessible and enjoyable to consume.
I'm totally with you on that.
It's about recognizing that learning is not a one-size-fits-all endeavor. What resonates with one person might not work for another. Some people thrive on abstract concepts, while others need to see and experience things to truly grasp them.
Yeah, it's like the difference between learning music theory and actually playing an instrument. Both are valuable, but they engage different parts of the brain and appeal to different learning styles.
Totally. And it's like, just like there are different musical instruments and genres, there are different approaches to learning, right? It's
Yeah.
about finding what resonates with you, what makes the information like click.
Exactly, and that's something that Byrne's work highlights beautifully. He challenges us to, rethink our assumptions about how information should be presented. Who says math has to be confined to, dry textbooks and monochrome diagrams? He reminds us that learning can be a multi-sensory experience, incorporating visual elements, even beauty, to enhance understanding.
It's like he took Euclid's Elements, a text often seen as the epitome of abstract reasoning, and made it come alive through color and design. Precisely. And in doing so, he opened up a world of possibilities for how we approach learning and teaching. It's a legacy that continues to inspire today as we explore new ways to make information more engaging and accessible in our increasingly visual world.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. You've given us a lot to consider about the power of visual learning, the importance of finding different approaches to engage with information, and the role that aesthetics can play in the learning process.
And perhaps, most importantly, the reminder that learning should be a joyful and enriching experience. When we find ways to make information engaging and personally relevant, we unlock a deeper level of understanding and a lifelong love of learning.
So for anyone listening, maybe this inspires you to revisit a subject you found challenging in the past, or to explore a new topic through a different lens. Who knows? You might just discover a hidden passion or talent you never knew you had.
After all, as Oliver Byrne's colorful journey through geometry beautifully demonstrates, there's always beauty and wonder to be found in the pursuit of knowledge.